actually, from a CSS standpoint, selected, right? Like when you click on following, this gray border should now be around following. To make that happen, let's go into our profile blade file, and we're just looking for the 3 navigation links. And notice they have a class property, and the first one, it ends with the class of active. So whichever one has the active class, it's going to have that gray border, and look selected. So all we need to do is only add this dynamically to the correct one. So here's what I would do. Get rid of the word active there, and instead have double curly brackets for something dynamic. And let's say, well, for starters, I'm going to use a ternary operator. So a ternary operator, first you start with the condition. So I'm going to say uppercase request, and it has a static method of segment. In the parentheses, I'm going to give it a value of 3. Let me explain what this means. So think of this like the third segment in the URL. If you look at your address bar for this URL, so whatever comes after your domain, like /, that's segment 1, this would be segment 2, this would be segment 3, right? And that's the piece of the URL that we're interested in so that we can select the appropriate link. Now, when you visit this link, just your base profile, there is no third segment. So I would just say, for this first one, if that equals nothing, question mark, what do I want to do? I want to have a string of text of active, colon, if it's not true, just don't do anything, just empty quotes. Okay? And then I would just duplicate this to save typing, just duplicate those double curly brackets. So just copy that for this next line. Right after the word link quotes, just paste it in. And the condition check would be if the third segment equals followers. Okay, and then for this third and final one, before the quotes, just paste it in. The condition check would be if it equals following. Give that a save. If you refresh, so I can click on followers, perfect. Look at the URL, look at which one's selected, beautiful. If I click on following, awesome. Now that we have this working, let's focus on removing some of the duplicate code in our different controller methods. So if we go back into user controller, remember we have the one function named profile. Here it is. And this makes sense for a blog post listing. And then we had, the duplicate function profile followers, profile following. So the idea is that each one of these 3 functions, it should really only be responsible for the thing that's making it unique. In other words, this function, the only thing it should be doing is loading the list of blog posts down here. And then the controller function for this URL, it should only be responsible for, retrieving the list of users. Everything else, we probably want to move away in some sort of shared function so that we're not repeating ourselves over and over again, right? Like checking to see if, are you currently following this user? Are you logged in? And especially shared things like the posts count. So in other words, when we render our blade template in each one of these, we would just want to render it and then only pass it the truly unique bit of data. So for the next few minutes, let's work on removing a lot of the duplicative code from these 3 functions. To make this happen, here's what I would do. Above our profile function, let's create a new function. I'm going to actually make it a private function. And you could name it anything. The name is not magical. I'm going to make up a name of like get shared data, parentheses, curly brackets. By making this private, all this means is that you could not call this function from our routes file, right? Private means we can only call this function from within this class itself. And in this situation, that's what I want. So here's what I would do. Take these lines of code where we say currently following equals 0, and then this if auth check. Just copy that into your clipboard, paste it here. Okay, now check this out. Here's the cool part. Within this new get shared data function, we can call, well, first of all, we're going to use the Laravel class or facade named uppercase view. It has a static method of share, semicolon. Let's be sure to import that. So you can right click on view, click import class. And we want this first one, illuminate support facades view. Cool. Now here's how this works. We can share a variable and then it will be available in our blade template. So we give it 2 things, A, comma, B. The first thing you give it is sort of a label for this property. Let's name it maybe shared data. And then the second argument is the actual data itself. So this would be an array. And then to save a bunch of typing, I would just go down into our profile function and essentially just give it this array that we've already spelled out. So just from that opening square bracket over to this far edge, this square bracket, just copy that. And then back in our shared function, the second argument, just paste in your clipboard. Only we don't need to give it the list of blog posts. So the only thing I would remove is this posts, associative array equals. It ends with get. I would just delete that, remove the extra comma. Cool. We can go ahead and save this. And now the idea is that we don't need this code in these three functions. So like in the profile function, we don't need any of this. You can delete it. And you can also, on the view, we also definitely don't need to give it, currently following. We don't need to give it avatar. We don't need to give it username. We only need to give it the thing that's unique for this actual function, right? Which is, this is the blog posts screen. So do indeed give it posts, but after that, we don't need to give it post count. So I would get rid of the comma and post count. Cool. Do the same thing for followers. Actually, to save a bunch of typing, I would just duplicate this return line, so copy that into my clipboard. For this profile followers function, delete all of this. You can even delete the return line, just paste it in, but change the template name to profile followers, and then do the same thing for this following one. So get rid of the return line, get rid of all those duplicate lines, paste it in, change the template to profile-following. Cool. And now before we save this, let's not forget we would actually just want to call this function in each of these three functions. So in other words, right, a request for a blog post screen comes in, you would say $this, look inside it and call, and we named it get shared data. So get shared data, semicolon. So then you would just do this for this second function, the profile followers and profile following. The beauty of this is that we don't have to pass any extra data ourselves. That function uses this view share. So shared data is just going to be available in these different Blade templates now. And before we save this file, I almost forgot that in our get shared data function, it doesn't know what the incoming user is based on the incoming URL, right? Like in other words, in these three functions, profile, profile followers, profile following, they're being fed the user in question from the incoming URL from the router. So in order for our get shared data function to be able to do its job, let's just pass it in these parentheses. Just pass it lowercase, $user, just like this. Cool. And then up in that private function, in the parentheses, just add a parameter. You can name it $user, just like this. Now this function has everything it needs to do its job. Let's save this file. And now let's just go adjust our three templates so that they actually pass shared data into the component. So in other words, if you go into, for example, profile post.blade, remember up at the top, I promised we wouldn't have this messy syntax where we're passing, 5 or 6 different properties. So on that line, all we would need now is just shared data equals quotes, $shared data. That's all we need. So you could go ahead and copy this top X profile line and just use that in profile followers. So I'm just pasting it in, hit save. Do the same thing in this file, profile following. Cool, so all three templates just use this syntax. And now let's go into our profile component. So in the components folder, profile blade. And throughout this file, I won't bore you with it. I can edit this part out, but anywhere where we're trying to access simple properties like avatar or username, right? Those would now be inside the shared data that we passed. So for example, like on this top avatar, this would be $shared data. Look inside square brackets for an array and it would be avatar. So you don't need the $avatar like this. Let me convert just one or two more with you and then, the rest you can do off camera without me. But for example, instead of username, this would be, right? $shared data, square bracket for an array, username. Let me do a few more with you actually. So this would be exclamation. So this would be $shared data, square brackets, currently following, quotes, square brackets. But obviously you wouldn't change, for example, like auth username. That's coming from the auth user call. So you're just replacing the instances where we were previously using things that had been passed into the Blade template. So for example, you would do the same thing for this username, right? It would look like this instead. Okay, so off camera, I just adjusted anywhere where we were using, avatar or username or post count, because those now live in our shared data array. Let's save this. Oops, looks like I forgot to save profile post.blade. Let me save that. And if we refresh, cool, I can visit the 3 different pages. The selected styling is showing up. This is great. And we've removed all of that unnecessary duplication from our code. So now, in our next lesson, we are perfectly set up to actually perform the unique actions for, this URL and this URL. So we'll show a list of relevant users. We'll update these counts to be dynamic. Should be a lot of fun to set up. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then.